Hello and welcome to Current Wave. I'm your host, Ayla Wayman, and in this podcast, we meander through our shared delusions and stumble into ethereal shit talking as we dive into the waves of the human experience. I'm so grateful to have you here. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope that you enjoy the ride.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I am just feeling inspired to come on here today and chat about some things. And I think that there's some Cancer season depths being brought up in a lot of my conversations. And I just had a deep conversation with a friend that, just touched themes of being human. And I wish I recorded that conversation, but it was impromptu and private. And I just wanted to share some thoughts for the collective right now. I don't even know where this is going, but I want to be here. I also am really interested in showing up when I'm inspired and showing up very imperfectly. I have a cold. I might need to blow my nose. I'm coughing. I have all of my laundry on my dining table. I'm like wearing a little cotton sports bra and I'm just here feeling real and raw and just having conversations with people around a lot of tenderness right now. And I want to start actually by tuning into both a question I posed and a response I received on Instagram stories. I just feel like there are a lot of shifts for everyone right now. We're really being asked to step into the void, to step into a new iteration of ourselves. And we're all in the in between where our new life, our next version of ourselves has not necessarily landed, but the way that we have been moving, the way that we have been doing life is no longer resonant, is no longer working. There is a shift that is being asked of us. And I think most of us are in the pregnant void of that, are in the darkness, are in the womb space where it's more of this felt sense of something that is pulling us forward. And there's not a lot of tangibility to it yet. You might not have the answers. I was just with one of my dearest friends who I have worked with on and off over the last several years, and she's wondering what to do with her business. She wants to have a business, but what does that look like? Because the way that she's been doing business, number one, is no longer working, and number two, is no longer feeling good. And what does feel good and what does work is still yet to be seen. She doesn't have those answers. And I think that when we're in the void, it is so difficult to sit there. I think this is like one of the biggest themes in life and one of the biggest themes in all of our development of ourselves is being able to sit in that stillness and that question and have the question be in ourselves and in our heart and in our mind, and that asking is these little like tendrils reaching out, asking the universe, asking for signs and feedback and direction. I think as humans, it's much easier for us to move forward when we think we know where we're going. And I think that that idea is interesting in and of itself. I think that there's a really interesting, delicate balance of how we create in this life and our co creation with God. This is the biggest theme of everything that I talk about: our will versus God's will, our vision versus God's vision, which is so much more expanded than we could ever possibly see. And learning in our own unique way how to navigate that. Because number one, I think it's different for each of us. That's why there are different lineages. That's why we have these ideas of this vision of where we want to go, what we want to do, who we want to be. And yet there's a lot of things that are really outside of our control, right? It is our responsibility and it is our innate way that we are made, I believe, as humans to have desires, to have inspiration, to have things that we want. I think that that's a little out of balance right now because we have so many examples of what that can be with social media and seeing a lot of people's lives, right? 100 years ago, you could only see your village or your town or your city and what other examples were there for you, and that was quite limited beyond the scope of, like, the people you knew and the lives that you actually saw into, and there wasn't as much choice, there wasn't as much freedom. You were born into a lot of the circumstances that you were born into, and no matter what anyone says, this is the most free time we've seen for a very long time for all types of people, all walks of people. There actually is less slavery and violence, etc., than there has previously been in a long time of history. I think there were golden ages around the world and times of harmony around the world, but we are in an opportune time, especially if you live in the United States, especially if you have certain levels of freedom. And with that comes great responsibility and I think great confusion. What do we do with our free will? And what is our soul's path? Because what we want is not always what is for us. And I have come up against that so much. That is the foundation of this work, is being a 6'3" in human design and wanting a path and having to spend the first 30 years of my life running into walls, gathering experiences as a way to form myself, just like hitting the ground and hitting the ground and getting back up and getting back up. And I don't think that that's an uncommon experience, regardless of any system or structure or personality test. That is what it is to be a human, to have a desire in your heart, in your mind, in your cells of this thing that we want, this thing that we see, whatever that is, and wanting to move toward it and feeling either supported in that process or thwarted in that process. And there's so many levels and layers of the ways that we keep ourselves at arm's length from our desires by being in our own patterns. It's so funny, and like the best example of this is being able to see your friend and your friend is talking about their job that they hate or their situationship or whatever that is, and seeing the circle that they're creating for themselves, seeing the cage that they have the key to and are either unwilling to unlock or don't know that they have the key, right? The first step is knowing we have the key. And the second step is being willing or even knowing how to unlock the door. And I don't think that that's actually an easy process. If that was, then we would do it. But most of us find ourselves hitting some wall with that at some level. And that level changes as we grow and as we expand and as we work with ourselves and our own frequencies, our own energetic imprints, our own soul's path. And right, so it's so easy to see someone else's situation, and it's much harder to see our own and to be able to understand the cage that we are in and how we are perpetuating the situations that we claim to not want. And I think there's some really real talk one has to have with themselves if you are in a situation that doesn't serve you, and that is probably the same situation that continuously doesn't serve you. Because usually Those patterns are linked to core wounds, core developmental pieces in our journey when that were imprinted on us when we were very young, of how our brain learned that the world works. And so we go out expecting that. And that is why subconscious reprogramming and all of those tools have become really popular because they target that very specifically and have been the most powerful thing that I've done in my life to make leaps and bounds because the conscious mind can see the path and want the vision. The conscious mind can say, I'm worthy, I'm deserving, I want this. And the unconscious mind can keep us so stuck and so blind to all of the ways that we are choosing our own suffering again and again and again. And it's really, really interesting. And I think that with all of this, there is this energy right now that I think is sitting in the collective where a lot of people are at the point where there's a lot of consciousness around our patterns, around what's possible. And we all are sort of holding a new version of the cage and the key and asking, okay, maybe I am a powerful creator. But what do I want and what am I moving toward? And we're in the void. We're in this in between. We're in this pivot where we want something else. We want something new. We want something alive and real. And I think that there's this urgency to live. There's this urgency to come back to the tangible, to the real world, to just be immersed in these ideas that we have. Because I think that a lot of the last era, which was, guided astrologically, was a lot of like that Piscean energy of it was kind of a bit of a mood board energy. Like, oh, this is the vision. This is what I want. And we're pasting it up on this mood board. And now that we have some of the key planets moving into Aries, now it is all about making it real and wanting it in a different, real, tangible way. And how beautiful. What a gift to be kind of being called back into the physical world, back into that groundedness that Aries has. Of course, Aries is like fiery, but I think, and there's a lot of intensity with that. I think that can be ungrounding depending on your chart and where these things fall. But I think that it is of the flesh in a way. Like fire has a realness to it that water, especially for me, really struggle with aspects of the water signs because it's like really getting lost in the sauce and being in the depths. And it feels like you're like how I feel is like I'm floundering, I'm drowning. I can't like swim in those depths. And the energy of Aries is just such a different energy. And so I think that that's also bringing this desire for immediacy, right? Aries wants it and it wants it now, immediately. There is no pause, there is no thought. It is the initiator, it is the spark of idea and go. And so when that energy is coming into our systems, is coming into the collective, that is that makes us want things and want them now. And yet, for a lot of us, that new iteration that we want is not even clear yet. It is that mood board is shifting, and we're realizing that there might be a deeper layer of desire that we weren't even acknowledging, a truer depth of what we want. And it might even be a lot more simple than we thought, or in a really different direction. And so, if you've been in one vein of life and there's this part of like wanting to pivot, but not knowing where to go, I hear you. We're in that collectively. That is the energy of this season. That is the energy of this time. And it's frustrating. right? I don't know if there's anything more frustrating than having a vision and seeing it and having to like do the steps to get there, or wanting that clarity and just not having it and just being like, okay, I want something different. There's all of this tension inside of me. I'm feeling this pull to do something else, to do something new, to have life in a different way, and to not even know in what direction, to not to be desiring from the body and from the heart, but not have the vision. And this is this is the work that I do because this is what I come up against all of the time and see everyone coming up against all of the time. And I think that this is all of our life work in various ways of clarifying what it is that we want and getting real with ourselves of what will it take to do that thing. And I think that when I say that, what I mean is that any vision, any goal, any idea that you have will require something from you. It will require your commitment and your devotion. And that can look really different for everyone. Sometimes what we need is more is gentleness, is surrender, is that path. And sometimes what we need is to do the things that we know we need to do. And so I think getting really real with ourselves and what that is for us is important. It's like where number one, yeah, orienting around a goal is very orienting. That's what I wanted to start with saying is like when we have a vision, then we have this clarity and we can say, okay, these are the steps to the vision, spiritually, tangibly, all of these ways. But if we don't even have a vision, it's a lot harder to move. And that is the process of life. We don't always need a vision pulling us forward. Sometimes our work is just to be in the void. Our work is just to be present. There's different seasons throughout the year where that is true, and there's different seasons throughout our life where that is true. And so that is that cyclical nature, that inhale and exhale, that ebb and flow of my business, inner tide. It's feeling your inner tide and being really honest with where you are in that process and learning to work with where you are in that process. Because it's not easy, but this is what we're here to do. We're here to be humans. We're here to create. We're here to desire. We're here to find our paths. We're here to give it all and take it all and get it all and lose it all. That is the human experience. It is a lot of contrast. It is a lot of upheaval. It is a lot of loss and movement and changing on the internal and on the external as well. And I think that the dial on this process is just turned all the way up right now. And I was inspired to have this conversation because I was talking to actually the ex partner of one of my friends, and he's just he's in life. He is in this moment where he feels like he's making, 5 steps forward, 10 steps back, 20 steps forward, 5 steps back, like all of these leaps and bounds and moving and going and then things changing. And that is, to me, always the truth. We're always evolving. I think the universe is always expanding. We're always moving forward in this version of how we perceive time and space. Even if we feel stuck, even if we feel stagnant, that's never really true when we look back. We were integrating something, we were learning something. There's always a gift in anywhere that we're in the process, but that doesn't mean that that moment is easy or good or fun. I think that there's a lot of suffering, right? There's a lot of suffering. And I think that it feels like we're in this really the way that the world is going right now is very stark because I think that there are people who are winning or seem to be winning very hard on kind of like a career level, a monetary level, with like the wealth gap growing and the world changing. It's like we're really seeing this disparity, honestly, of people who have a lot of choice, a lot of options, a lot that's at their disposal, and then people who have nothing, really have nothing. And especially in the US, I feel that we're so protected from this. And not to say that that doesn't exist here, because it does, but especially with the natural disasters, especially with the wars, especially with the genocide and the horrors that are happening, it's really interesting to be in a position of privilege in late stage capitalism and just be contemplating life and contemplating all of these things. I think that this peak of capitalism has us just like obsessed with ourselves and obsessed with the physical world and what we can get and what we can create. And manifestation has really moved into that too. And it's interesting. I feel so many things about it, and I come back to this almost every time I speak on these topics, because we have immense power in ourselves, in our energy, in how we meet the moments in our lives, and we are on the receiving end of many things that we have no control over. And where we are born and the circumstances that we are born into are a very strong baseline for what is possible. And there's many people who are able to move through that and navigate that in amazing ways. And I think that there's a lot of possibility. But for me, the work always comes down to the inner work and the deeper threads of what it is to be a human and what it is to cultivate capacity inside of ourselves and inside of our own hearts and inside of our own selves, to become unconditional and to not be driven by external results, to be able to handle hardship and still find levity, to still find joy, to still find the beauty in the most devastating places. And it's really not easy to do that. And I find that the more that I have mastered that in my own versions of life, it pulls my energy into a space where more things become possible, where I'm able to move kind of like sideways into different timelines, we could say. I think there's a lot of ways to look at this. We can like put spiritual jargon on it, but more and more I'm wanting to simplify. And yeah, I think that there's a grounded approach to a lot of this. And I'm learning to kind of pare down the way that I think and talk about it, and maybe not even use the wisdom systems to do that, to not use astrology or human design to explain experiences and just explain them tangibly for what they are. Anyway, there's a lot of pieces in all of this, but I just think that we're in it collectively. And I think that Cancer season can really bring up the void and bring up the desires and nostalgia, but nostalgia maybe for the future, nostalgia for our visions, for our untapped potential, like sort of this future looking nostalgia, which maybe is actually yearning. But I find that my yearning can be so dialed up. And I actually think that Cancer season is a lot about being in the void and being in the feelings, and it's about being in the heat of summer and just being with what is and being with the moment without trying to shift it or change it or XYZ. That's not really Cancer energy. And then we move into the next signs, and the progression of the signs is this beautiful way that allows us to integrate all of these parts of us, that allows us to work with all of these parts of us. So, Cancer is essentially illuminating the depths, is illuminating our emotional bodies, our watery selves, these parts of us that want to be seen, that want to be tended. And it's just very poignant, and it can be very difficult because it's not really the energy of doing, it's the energy of being. Cancer is a very feminine sign. It's ruled by the moon, which is sort of like, besides Venus, our most feminine, connective planetary body because of the feminine connection to the moon, to our moon cycles, our bleeding cycles. And so Cancer is tapping into that, and it's a being energy and it is not a doing energy. And that's a lot of where my frustration personally comes in, because I'm seeing things and I'm feeling things. And when we see things and feel things, we want to usually change them and spring into action. But what we have coming up is so beautiful because we have Leo coming in to bring that spark again, that fire, that creative energy of ideas and inspiration and create the creativity of Leo, and that sense of self gets returned to us. We get returned to our power, to our own orientation, to how we want to be presented in the world, to how we want to be seen and heard and observed, and how we want to be in our creativity. It's seeing all of the things that come up as we're in Cancer, as we're in the depths, and then illuminating them with the light of the fire of Leo and being able to creatively work with them and problem solve. And then we go into Virgo, which gives us the planning, that gives us this meticulous nature of actually making different plans, of putting things into place, of sorting, of sifting, of saying this and this and this and in this way. And we have this sort of interesting way that Mercury manifests through Virgo, that is choices, that is options, that is sort of like dialing things in and choosing from that inspiration that Leo brings, that authenticity, that truth that Leo arises in us, and that inspiration. And then we get to say, oh, okay, these are the things through the inspiration that I actually want to work with, that I actually want to be with and want to do and love and create. So it's intense, but there are so many ways to work with this energy. And I think the first step is being in the void when it's uncomfortable, and knowing that we don't have the answers, knowing that we do have free will, that we do have power, that we do have choice, and trying to use this time to see what is a lot, what isn't, what versions of us are we just done with? And in a simple way. I'm also really tired with a lot of spiritual things of like letting go what no longer serves us. Like, yes, that is the inhale and the exhale. Always, we are always taking in and letting go. That is the ebb and flow. That's the baseline of existence, but it just is not inspiring to say it in those ways. The iteration of that I'm working with is just, what is the cage that you are sitting in, and where is the key? What do you actually want? Are you willing to see it and claim it, and no longer being scared of that? No longer being scared of the truth of what we want, whatever that is. I think that there's an urgency also in this moment. There's a lot of unknowns in the world with the climate, with politics. I actually have this optimistic view that I'm going to keep expressing, but I don't think that that is like without challenge. There are real challenges already in the world. And so, how do we create a life with that? And I think is no longer delaying our truth. Whatever that is, if that is needing to have a conversation with someone, needing to end a relationship or a friendship, or separating ourselves from a friend group, from a place that we live, from our own ways of thinking, I think there's just a line that is being drawn in the sand, and we have a choice to. I think we're just feeling this power rising up in us and knowing that we do have a choice. And I think that this is something that is scary, because a choice means that we have agency. A choice means that we can fail. A choice means that we are going to put ourselves on the line, put our hearts on the line. And maybe it's telling someone you love them, you know, going for giving your number to someone you are attracted to in public. It is starting the business, ending the career. For me, just really honestly, what's coming up and the season of life that I am entering in that's been really confronting is that I have really wanted to have a business and build something in a really particular way, and I've been really blessed on that path. And I actually have two businesses. And it's becoming very clear to me that I really want to be a mother and I really want to have children, and that I will not be able to work in the same way that I do and be a mother. And that's confronting on a number of levels, because I am in my work world in my masculine. I actually hold a masculine container for my clients of structure, of creation, and they get to be the feminine wave of their expression of their business and their work. And I'm in my masculine in my job with that. And I'm understanding that that is going to need to transform. And that will require me taking a leap that will feel bad, because it will feel new and it will feel scary. And my ego and my being, my energetic being, that will feel like a threat to my safety. And whether or not that's true is unclear. I find that when we leap, usually if we're leaping toward a pure thing, a pure desire, there is a path. That doesn't necessarily mean it's easy. It's actually often not. But that if we're moving towards something that is aligned with us, there will be a flow, even if there's road bumps along the way. And so we have to leap again and again and again and again. And it doesn't end. It really doesn't end. The leaps actually get bigger. And so I'm at this juncture where this other desire is coming up that I've always known I've had, but it hasn't been tangible. And now it's tangible because I'm like, I want a baby and I want a baby really soon. And that feels urgent. And so that urgency is showing me very clearly what is no longer working and the cage that I'm in. And I'm going to have to make shifts that are going to be leaps in ways that are going to be unknown. It's going to actually ask me to be in my feminine even more. I'm in my feminine in some areas of my life and not in others. And it's going to actually require even more feminine energy for me to probably conceive, number one, be in a receptive enough state to allow my body to relax enough to get pregnant, and then to have the space to make the incredibly beautiful but real sacrifice of being a mother and choosing to put this little being first and to devote my time and energy to that. And I just know how challenging that is. And also, really realizing that in order for me to do that, I will need a masculine partner who is going to be able to provide for me to some in some way, and getting very clear on what that looks like for me, what my truth around that is, what my needs around that is, and then actually presenting that and asking that, which is, I'm finding to be very vulnerable and beautiful, and a growth edge and an opportunity and a dance and something that I'm feeling excited about, but it isn't necessarily the easiest thing because there's a certain level of guilt that I hold in asking that, because I think there's a lot of pressure that is put on a man to provide. I think that is a scary thing. I think that is an intense thing. And there's a lot of action that needs to be taken and a lot of surrender that needs to be implemented. And so that sort of details that are coming up for me, and really this burning desire to be a mother coming to the table, and also not actually being there yet. My life not actually being set up yet for that to be the way I want to do that. You know, many people aren't able to think about that with intention, or get pregnant. Having children is also such a wild, magical experience of when a baby comes through, and how that works. And we don't always get to choose often. But if we're in a position where it feels like we have that choice, and wanted, I did not come from that necessarily. We were very wanted, but it wasn't like my mom had this nuclear family and this setup and this providing husband and this one house and this very routine world set up to bring children into. It was a bohemian, hippie, wild ride of experience in that. And she was a single mother until I was 9. And um, that made me who I am, and I wouldn't change that for the world. And that has never been my vision of how I want to build a family. And so I've wanted to do this with a lot of intention and planning and conscious conception, and finding the right partner to do this with, and building a life with someone has been a long time vision. And it's become something that I want very, very much, and is coming front and center. And it's scary. Our our dreams and our desires also can be very confronting when we actually approach them, right? We say we want to be a business owner and have a business until you have a business. And then I was just talking with my friend, and we built her business, and she was set to kind of, the trajectory of everything was like, oh, wow, we're going to make $1 million this year. We built a business that will make $1 million this year. And then so many things outside of our control happened, so that net profit at the end of the year, she made zero. And we were riding this high wave of halfway through that year, essentially being almost at 500,000, and that growing and building and projecting into the future with that, and then everything crashing and burning in ways that I won't even get into. But right, her desire was to build this business and make $1 million that year, and we were set to do that. And then that confrontation of that desire, first, while she was gaining that success and a lot of movement and things happening, was really powerful, and a lot to hold. it, it's it's wild, but sometimes really good things are very, very hard to hold, right? I think Gay Hendricks has been the the voice on that for a long time, of our upper limits and what we actually have the capacity to hold, because you can say that you want XYZ, but can you hold it? You want to be a queen? That's a lot of responsibility. You want a business? That's a lot of responsibility. There is always going to be something going wrong in a business. There's always going to be that. You want a family, you want a partner. It can be really interesting when that shows up, and seeing those patterns and those ways that we self sabotage, those ways that we are not willing to receive, those ways that we put ourselves in all of these cages. I do think it's the era of holding the key and breaking out of the cage, but it is interesting work. Anyway, I just really wanted to talk about this because it's really alive in everyone that I know and all of the conversations I'm having. And I think people are struggling with it. I will say that this is my life's work. This is what I work with. This is what I teach, helping you find your own energetic blueprint, understanding your patterns, your way, finding threads of your vision to move toward. And there's a lot to say on that. And then moving toward them, integrating parts of ourselves, finding that key, finding our power, feeling our potential and acting on it from where we are and not from sort of this far off distant place, but really building a path from where you are toward where you want to be. Even if maybe where you want to be is just having a vision to begin with, having a North Star to move toward. And I'm going to be leading our fall cohort through this process beginning around the fall equinox, September 21st. So if that is interesting to you, then I'm here. I would love to have a conversation, and I will also be sharing that page of how you can join. So thank you so much for being here, and I hope that this was just a helpful conversation. Thank you so much.